Hello, I'm Sodek, the half of Mystical Teachings, and in today's video I will talk about Mono White Heroic. In my opinion, one of the premier aggro decks in the format. In the past, I was playing more combo decks in Pauper. I played Brute Scale, I played Balustrade Spy, High Tide as well, with a small episode for Mono Blue Fairies when they were at the top of the meta. But in the recent months, I was focusing more on the heroic deck because I feel it's dramatically underplayed, and I already had some nice results on MTGO streets, as well as in mid-level paper tournaments. But I still feel the deck is underplayed and it should have a wider audience. Okay, so. What is Mono White Heroic? Mono White Heroic is a linear aggro deck and the goal is to create a very big creature with a lot of keywords and dominate the combat. And there are two main ways of victory. The first one is to go as fast as possible, and you go all in on one creature and attack with a huge guy, and usually the opponents cannot do much about it. Or you can take a slower route, especially against interaction, and you are playing the game similar to Boggles, when you try to blank the opponent's interaction, and with the biggest body on the battlefield. Generally speaking, the deck is quite easy to play, but there are some decisions in terms of sequencing, in terms of what you want to achieve in the matchup, that will separate good and great players. For me, it's very cool and rewarding to play this type of deck, and I feel that nearly every aggro player would like it as well. Okay, strengths. Heroic is good against monocolored decks that don't interact too hard with your creatures. So, for example, mono blue decks, mono blue terror or mono blue fairies. They fight on the stack, but once something resolves, and it usually something resolves because when you're on a play, you play your creatures, they don't have counterspell up. It's relatively easy to dominate the combat once you don't have to be worried about the creature removal. It's quite similar to elves when they don't interact with your creature at all and you're racing. And from my perspective, after the testing, at first I was not very pleased with the matchup, but once I realized what I want to achieve, it became much easier to navigate, and usually I win those races, so I feel it's a good matchup. Heroic is also great against red decks that are soft to big creatures with Spirit Link. So Rally Red and Red Madness, the reason is simple. Laguna Band Trailblazer is a really good creature against decks that rely on the Lightning Bolt. It's also good against slow midrange decks without the wall of removal. So for example, if you are playing against Affinity or Chant, they look like they have a lot of removal, but in practice they have like 4 copies of Kazdan or Galvanic Blast and maybe Crack Shaman. So it's quite easy to play around, and once you establish your creature, you can just dominate the combat quite easily. Heroic should also be faster than other decks that try to blank the opponent's removal, namely Boggles. In my opinion, when the both decks don't have creature removal, the one that has hexproof is disadvantaged compared to the one that has extra counters per casting a spell. So from my perspective, it's quite solid matchup. Also, more generally speaking, the fact that Heroic fits well to the metagame in forms of that, since it's a mono white aggro deck that goes not wide but it tries to create one big creature, stuff like blasts, stuff like mass removal, for example, breath weapon, or any effects like this aren't that good against Heroic, and so it turns out that the opponents don't side in too many cards to stop you. And if the opponent wants to stop you, they must play specific answers to combat it. Okay, weaknesses. Heroic struggles against the decks with a lot of removal or a mix of removal plus some other forms of interaction. So, for example, if there are gardens with 50 plus removal spells and Tightening Blade, this is a problem. Blue-black terror with counter magic, snuff out, and creatures is a problem. Borosbury as well, especially with Giant to Nowhere and Lightning Bolts. Decks with white removal like Giant to Nowhere. So, Cowgates or some other Journey to Nowhere decks can be quite effective against our protection, because if our way to protect our creatures is to have protection spells, giving protection from white isn't the best idea to protect your creatures from Journey to Nowhere, because you are losing all your auras while doing so. So it can be quite challenging, but it's manageable to play around. Another problem for the deck is the faster combo decks, so something that can race you like Cycling Storm or Rabbi Storm. We don't have any tools to slow them down, so it's just a pure race and they are advantaged. And the last one, it's combo control decks that have some sort of interaction early, so we cannot rush them. And once they stabilize the control, they have just lock out us on the game. So, for example, Familiars with Stonehorn Dignitary, or Turbo Fog with a bunch of fogs, or Prison Throne with Gold Flicker Loops, and so on and so on. Generally speaking, these decks are quite hard to beat, but they can be rushed from time to time if they struggle to, for example, work with their mana bases, or they fail to find their interactive spells. And of course, the last weakness, if the opponent is prepared with, for example, Extract the Confession, for example, so the sacrifice effect that doesn't care about your creature count, but it forces you to sacrifice the creature with the biggest power. This is close to, I don't say unwinnable, but there's no counterplay to that other than brute force and overpowering it in a fair way. Okay, now I will talk about the 3 possible builds I'm playing, or they are around in the heroic metagame. First one is the one, let's say, designed by me, or the list that I like playing the most. In my opinion, it's the best for the current metagame, mostly because I really like flying as a mechanic, and Wonder White Aerialis, also known as Skyward Spider, has the ability to protect itself, so against a lot of removal. So for example, against Red Madness, it's quite good to have it. The rest is quite stock. You have a bunch of pump spells that are trying to create your creature bigger. You have Spirit Link as well, and a few protection spells. Also, my last finding was the Guiding Voice. I will talk about it later, but I feel the extra card advantage engine for the deck was quite good. So this version it's a bit slower compared to the other ones, but relies on the flying creatures and evasion to get around some form of removal and get around blockers more easily. So the Goldfish time slower, resilience higher. Another version is the solid footing version. So instead of trying to have an evasive creature, we are trying to be lower to the ground, playing more 1-drops with the form of Armored Armadillo and solid footing, so it can attack more easily for a lot of damage early. And there are some other fillers like Sandstone Breach, something that enables solid footing. It can be faster, but also it's more high variance in terms of that you need to draw your cards in a good order for it to matter. This also has fewer flying creatures, so in some matchups it can be a problem to get through. And the last one is a sub version of my version, but I like it a lot because of the concept. Instead of playing Guiding Voice, which is quite good but can be also quite slow, assuming playing 1-drops and 2-drops is slow, you can play Mutagenic Growth as a 0 mana spell instead, and you can try to make your deck faster. And I'm pretty sure there are other sub builds of the heroic here, so I I don't want to say that one version is 100% better than the other. There are some pros and cons of each version I will talk about later. But the core means playing Trailblazer, Skyguard, and a bunch of creatures and a bunch of auras with Ethereal Armor, Homestead Courage, Hyena Umbra, Sentinel Eyes, and so on is the core of the archetype. Okay, let's talk about each section now. In my opinion, the core of the deck are the creatures. The first two have heroic, so they let you get extra value from each of your pump spells. So you very quickly create very big creature that's very hard for the opponent to overcome. Laguna Band Trailblazer, phenomenal against red decks because it dodges Lightning Bolt naturally, then it grows. It's really good at blocking. It also can create the fastest clock. It's the only way to kill on turn 3 if you play Laguna Trailblazer and multiple Eternal Armors, as well as other enchantments. It's possible to set up even a turn 3 kill. Akron Skyguard, it has some problems in terms of losing to Lava Dart very hard, but outside that, it's a evasion creature that grows really fast. So it's crucial in some matchup, for example, against elves. It's literally the best card you can have. Just phenomenal. I can always play 4. I tend to side it out sometimes or like trim it to 2 copies post board, for example, against Lava Dart decks. But in the majority of matchups, it will stay as a 4 copy, and it's even more important post board when the evasion and chip damage matter most. Skyward Spider, or a released if you're playing online, is the newest addition to the deck. It does 2 things. It has Ward 2, so it can protect itself from the creature removal in the early game. So if you are on the play, you play Skyward Spider on turn 2. With Ward 2, there's outside Snuff Out, there's nothing that can kill it. And once you untap, you play, for example, Hyena Umbra and a bunch of cards, and Skyward Spider is as unkillable as it can be in the format without creatures with hexproof and undestructible. The modified, it's very easy to get. So equipment and auras and counters are modifications. So basically anything you play will unlock the flying ability that requires to be Skyward Spider to be modified. Once it has flying, it's really good at flying through the blockers and ignoring most of the opponent was trying to do. Generally speaking, in my opinion, Heroic should ignore what the opponent is trying to doing and try to go past blockers and go straight to the face. And this trio does it the best because it's a nice combination of being fast, being evasive, and being immune, at least to some extent, to removal. Of course, there are other mind-deckable options. If you want to play the solid footing versions, you need to play Armored Armadillo to have more bodies that will work with the solid footing, obvious. If you want to play more creatures, for example, versus red decks, or if you don't want to get rushed against other aggro, you can play Sacred Cat. 1/1 lifelink is cool, Embalm is even better, and there are some games when you can put enchantments on the card and win this way. Vault Scourge is another super interesting option, in my opinion, is a bit underplayed, mostly because it's not intuitive to play this card, but generally speaking, having a black creature that dodges Snuff Out can be quite good. It has 2 really important keywords, so flying and lifelink can't help you with in race situations because you don't need to bother about blockers and just keep attacking. That's easy. The downsides are also obvious. You are losing 2 life by casting it, so if it dies, you are losing 2 life for no reason. So for example, it's terrible against Lava Dart decks despite having lifelink. Or at least you need to spend a lot of time for the setup to make sure that your Volskirch will survive, which can be a problem. It also an artifact, so post board when the opponent has disenchant effects, it can be affected by this. But in my opinion, it's a secondary problem for the card. Okay, the last one I want to mention is Hopeful Eidolon. The enchantment creature with lifelink, so it's very similar to Sacred Cat, but instead of Embalm, you have the option to bestow. So you can, if you draw it late, you can use it as an aura, pumping your main creature. It's also an enchantment, so it counts for the Eternal Armor. Okay, one more thing about the creatures. Note that all of these creatures are for 1 mana, and I can't imagine playing anything else that costs 2 mana because we already have 2 really good 2-drops. And if you want to stay mono white, I just don't see any other options. If you want to play more creatures, you should look only at the cards that cost 1 mana only. Protection and Evasion. Another aspect of the deck is that you need to protect your creatures because we don't have hexproof, and if you spend a lot of cards on making one creature huge, it's super hard to come back when the creature dies. For example, to cast down or something like this. Nowadays there are 2 protection spells that are played. The first one is Benevolent Blessing. The second is the Emerald Scatters. Benevolent Blessing is an aura enchantment, so works with Eternal Armor. It has flash, so it's good as an aura. It gives you protection from the color of the choice, and the wording is super interesting here. This effect doesn't remove auras and equipment you control that are already attached to it. So if you have a bunch of cards, for example, you have Eternal Armor, Spiriting, and Sentinel's Eyes on the creature, you can even name white. They will stay on the creature, but you won't be able to put any other effects on the creature that gets Benevolence Blessing for white. I like the fact that once you cast Benevolence Blessing, the effect is permanent, not until end of the turn. So there are multiple matchups when you, for example, play this, name green against elves, for example, and you have the unblockable creature. In my opinion, super important. Emerald Scatter does the similar role, but it doesn't stay on the battlefield. In exchange, it costs only 1 mana, which is super good for this type of deck. And it has a rebound, so you can, for example, protect something from the removal, then untap, rebound it, give it unblockable by giving protection to the color of the broker, and swing for lethal. It also can trigger Heroic twice because of the rebound again. Generally speaking, your protection spells have 2 roles. They protect and then also give your creatures unblockable, which is super important to get through, especially if you draw Laguna Band Trailblazer as your creature to create the pressure. And there are also other versions of the card, for example, Apostle's Blessing, Staff Out, something like this. Generally speaking, these effects, like giving protection, these are the 2 of the best that can be played, and I don't see reasons to play the worst versions of the card. Okay, now auras. To make our heroic creature big, we need to play something to make it big. So there are a few really good cards here. Note that all of them are for 1 mana, so it's easy to stack them up very early, very easily. And this should let you dominate nearly every board state. So Eternal Armor is the only card that breaks the cycle of giving +2/+2 per 1 card, because if you put any other effects on the heroic creature, it gives you +1/+1 plus the +1/+1 from the card from heroic. Eternal Armor has an option to give you more than 2 power, so it's crucial in it's super important when you want to kill the opponent very fast. Hyena Umbra, on the other hand, it's not the fastest in terms of the clock, but it gives you First Strike, which helps you attack early through the blockers, and it gives you Totem Armor, so it's a protection spell against removal spells. It also helps you in the combat if you don't want to lose the creature this way. Sentient Eyes is the aura that gives you vigilance, so it lets you stabilize the board in a different way, so you can, for example, attack for a few damage while not letting the opponent to attack without losing a creature while doing so. I also like the fact that it has escape, so it's a weird form of card advantage the deck desperately needs, because the deck doesn't have real card draw engines, so you need to use something like this. So if, for example, Sentient Eyes goes to the graveyard, you can escape it. If you lose the creature that got, or for example, if you are a bit worried that your creature can die to opponent's removal, you can start with Sentient Eyes, so if the removal happens, you still have the aura available for you. Spearing Link is the last addition, and it's more of the meta call than a real need. It's a way to make sure that you are winning the race matchups, especially red. Because if you have a huge creature, giving it the sort of lifelink is huge. Some of you would ask why we are not playing lifelink. There are two reasons. You can stack Spirit Links and all of them will work, which wouldn't work with the lifelink, because you can have only one lifelink, but you can have multiple triggers from multiple Spirit Links. And there's also a way to neutralize the opponent's creature by enchanting the opposing creature. So for example, if the opponent has unchecked Gutter Snipe, you can Spirit Link the Gutter Snipe and the triggers will deal you 2 damage and gain you to life. So it will be neutralized. So sometimes it happens, and it's cool to have this option. Okay, we had an auras as pump spells. There are also pump spells on the sorcery, and there are 2 that are worth mentioning in my opinion. The first one is Homestead Courage. It gives you +1/+1 and vigilance until end of the turn, so it's kind of important if you want to dominate the board, and it's even more important in the solid footings version, so use it wisely. The flashback means that it's basically +4 counters from 1 card, which is phenomenal. Guiding Voice is another card that does similar things. It gives you the counter and has the mechanic Learn. Learn can give you a lesson, or it can let you discard the useless cards, so for example an extra land or an extra creature, and it digs you into something potentially relevant, for example Eternal Armor, Spirit Link, and so on. What Guiding Voice can find? That's a good question. In my opinion, in Mono White Heroic there are 3 playable lessons. The first is Sokka's Sword Training, so just a +2/+2 with a clue token, so it's a, let's say, high CMC combat trick that repays itself in the later stages of the game. If you want to play something faster, you can play Yip Yip, so it's a 1 mana +2/+2. We don't have allies, so we won't get flying as well. Airbending Lesson is our way to interact with the opponent in a weird way. There are multiple ways to use it. So for example, you can airbend the blocker and go for lethal. You can airbend cards that are, for example, enchanted, or for example, if something has Nyxbone Hydra on it. Okay, Nyxbone Hydra is not the best example because it will just come back. But for example, if you're playing the mirror, you can just airbend the main heroic creature and easily win the race. You can also airbend Ancestral Max versus Boggles or Armadillo Cloak. It's also possible to airbend your own cards. So for example, at the end of turn, if the opponent doesn't do the match, you can just airbend your aura, so then you can recast it for 2 mana. So you draw a card in the process, and you can recast something to get 1 more heroic counter, or re-enchant the aura to something else, which happens from time to time. Okay. Okay, there are also other interesting options, like I said, Mutagenic Growth as a 0 mana spell, sometimes useful. I like the fact that Mutagenic Growth is really good at protecting Skyward, at protecting your Akroan Skyguard from lightning bolts and lava darts, because the creature is 1/1 based, then it gets +1/+1 from the heroic trigger, then +2/+2, so it survives lightning bolt. So if you expect a lot of Red Madness creatures, Red Madness decks, maybe this is the option to play around it. Another version is Chomano's Blessing, basically a worse Benevolent Blessing, because it will protect your creature and it will stay on the creature, but if you give protection from white, your auras will still fall. So it's quite good, but the same as Benevolent creatures, you can also enchant the opponent's creatures to get rid of the auras. Quite important. Okay. As I said earlier, I'm the strong advocate for playing the Guiding Voice version with 8 flyers, but there's also players who are playing Solid Footing, Armored Armadillo, Sandstone Breach trio instead, and I want to talk about the pros and cons of this. The pros are self-explanatory. If you play Armored Armadillo turn 1, and you play Solid Footing and, for example, Sentinel's Eyes on turn 2, you are attacking for 6 damage out of nowhere. It can go even harder if you go for a Laguna Trailblazer, if you add a Tether Armor to the mix, and so on and so on. So it can create a lot of really fast draws. But I see a few problems here. First of all, all of these cards are really bad by its own. Armored Armadillo, if you don't have Solid Footing, is just bad, because Ward 1 isn't as good as having Evasion. Not having power without any other help means that you have a lot of walls, which can be useful versus, for example, red matchups, but outside it, it's not that good. Solid Footing without the high toughness creature is just a +1/+1 on a flash, nothing spectacular. And Sandstone Breach, while giving your creature vigilance and +1/+1, it's also a tap land, which can be a problem in this type of deck. So generally speaking, if you want to race, maybe this version is better, but in the more diverse metagame, let's say, I would opt for playing the 8 flyer version instead. But it also has results. It's not like it's strictly worse than the other versions. Also, it's possible to go for the red splash. So, for example, with the cards like Satyr Hoplite, Tendix, Legionnaire, Temur Battle Rage, Assault Strobe, Ancestral Anger, and so on, it's maybe possible to create something that will go play 2 colors, and by doing so you will have infinite number of heroic creatures. Also, the red spells with especially Temur Battle Rage solves the problem of not having anything to go past the opponent's blockers. So the double strike trample combo on the huge creatures is quite good. But there are some problems. Of course, the biggest problem is the mana base. You will force yourself to play tap lands or more mana cards in the deck. So, for example, you can play Lotus Petal to speed up and get yourself on the par in terms of the mana, despite playing tap lands. So maybe there's something there. I like the concept, but I'm also a bit worried about how the consistency of the deck will be affected. But it's a cool idea, and maybe in the future the Boros Heroic will be the go-to version of the deck. So far, I'm in the mono white camp, and I played a lot of the mono white deck. Like technically, like 120 games I played so far, with the 69% win rate. So I like my position here. Okay, the mana base, just plains, as easy as that. I don't want to play any tap lands in the deck because I want to be able to cast my spells on time. But there are two exceptions I can think about at least. The first one is Secluded Step. I saw a few players playing it, but in my opinion, the cycling in the late game is not as impactful as in terms of the positive impact as the negative impact of having a tap land in the early game. In my opinion, it's just not good, and I wouldn't play the card. Remote Fart, on the other hand, is quite interesting because it gives you it can generate you up to 4 mana on turns 2 and 3. So, for example, you can play Remote Farm with a lot of 2 drops. It can be quite beneficial to go so, or you won't lose that much by playing a Tapland turn 1. And this lets you play, for example, a Crown Skyguard and keep the protection on turn 2, so you can on turn 3 you can play 2 auras while keeping protection and go from there. The problem is that losing lands can be a problem in the deck when you quite often work on 2 or maybe 3 lands. Losing one very early can be troublesome, but on the other hand you get the mana back. In the future I plan to test Remote Farms as a 2-off and see how it goes. Maybe it's broken, who knows. Okay, let's talk about the sideboard options. At first, let's talk about what makes a good sideboard option. Because in my opinion, after I saw multiple sideboards in Heroic, I feel that some people just miss it. In my opinion, since Heroic has a very low curve, but on the other hand, it uses the curve quite aggressively, and it's quite hard to find a space in the early game to play something that doesn't contribute to the game plan. In my opinion, the sideboard option should be as cheap as possible. Ideally for 0 mana, but it's quite rare in Pauper, so 1 mana is the key. Mostly because you want to be able to do your thing while interacting with your opponent or protecting your creature. Your cards should fit into strategy, so ideally if it's an aura, it's a plus. If it's an instant that targets, is a plus, and something that's, for example, a creature can be problematic because people will be prepared to deal with the creatures post-board. Alternatively, if the card single-handedly stops the opponent's game plan, it can be played. So, for example, Fairy Macabre is a good example of the 1-card kill against Spy. So, I can see playing them. Also, it's important to note that cards shouldn't be an overkill. So, you shouldn't play too many protection spells because, for example, if you have 4 Benevolence Blessing, 3 Emerge protections, and you add 4 more to the mix with Hyena Umbra and so on, you'll quickly realize that you have 15 plus protection spells, and the first or the second drone will be useful, but the third one will not. So you don't want to be overwhelmed by drawing too many copies of the same effect. That doesn't really contribute to the power of the creature. Okay, let's talk firstly about the traps. So the cards that I don't feel they fit into the heroic strategy very well. Don't get me wrong; these are good cards, and I can see moments or reasons when you should play them, but they're not as good as people tend to think about them. First of all, is Revoke Existence, exiling artifact or enchantment. In practice, that means that you are exiling lands from the Jantor Affinity. I feel that these matchups are not about destroying their lands. It's about making sure that your creature will stay on the battlefield. So instead of playing Revoke Resistance, I would rather want to play more protection spells, or just keep my creature and pump spells count high. So I don't plan to attack the opponent's mana bases that much. Devlet Elite, on the other hand, technically it was played for 2 reasons. You wanted to kill elves with it. So for example, if the opponent has the mana dork, you could just provoke it to be a blocker. with any form of pump, Deflate Elite would kill an elf all the time. But I don't like this strategy because if we are on a draw, then the opponent can have the elves that are that doesn't have summoning sickness, so they can tap in response to the provoke, or maybe they can tap themselves before blocking, so they are not able to block, so provoke won't do a thing. Also, generally speaking, when I'm playing heroic, I don't want to interact with the opponent. I don't want them to block my creatures. I want to avoid blocking by giving protections. So I'm not the biggest fan of the card. I can see it being played, for example, if you want to play around Riding Chrysalis and you want to have something that will distract the Chrysalis while the other creatures are making damage, and you can prevent Deviled Elite from dying in combat with this second ability. But generally speaking, I'm not the biggest fan of the card. Draven Charm, on the other hand, looks quite good until this looked at first very good to me, but once I realized how awkward it is to keep the 2 mana at all times, I stopped playing the card entirely. Because if you want to exile the graveyards, it's very easy to see that you have the card because you are not doing anything else. So, for example, the spy opponent can just wait for the Mesmeric Fiend and win this way. The Rash player can, to some extent at least, try to play around the effects. And if they are playing, for example, Archaeomancer or something like this, they can just do other things, and the Draven Charm impact won't be as big. I also don't like it as a removal because we are not a go-wide deck with a lot of creatures. We usually have 1 or 2 creatures on the board and make them big. So it's not guaranteed that your Draven Charm will kill everything. It's possible to actually miss on this. Okay, let's talk about cards that are quite good in the deck. First of all, there are protection spells, Shield of Duty and Reason, and Mask of Lowering Grace. The protection from green and blue is more often used as an unblockable effect. The protection from red and black is more often used as a protection from removal spells, but it's also quite good at not letting the, for example, Red Madness players with Gutter Snipes, Voldaren Epicures, and Sneaky Snacker to block your creatures. Extremely important cards, in my opinion. You should play 3 copies in each sideboard. I don't want to play more because we already have a bunch of other protection spells that are doing this. Some lists play Emerge Unscattered as a copy number 3 or number 4 in the sideboard, and that's okay. Lawrence Escape is interesting because it lets you protect your creatures while not giving it protection. So instead it gives Hexproof and Indestructible. So it's super important versus Journey to Nowhere. If you are playing versus a lot of Cowgates, you should have Lawrence Escape in your deck. Probably 1/1 Cyber or something like this. And it also has Cry 1, which is somewhat cool, and it can protect against any other removal spell. So I like the card, and I feel it's a bit underplayed in this matchup, in this archetype. Graveyard Hate is another section that usually fits in the deck, usually in 2 copies, sometimes 3 copies. The go-to card should be Fairy Macabre because it's in hand, it's uncounterable, it's just an ability, so it's super hard to stop. Tormod Script and Relic of Progenitus can also be good, but they sit on the battlefield, so for example a Mask Vandal, which will be sided in or at least kept in the deck anyway, against the deck full of enchantments. It will be able to destroy them. Also, exiling both graveyards with Relic of Progenitus isn't that free because we have 8 cards that have either Escape or Flashback. So it's just not the best idea. Generally speaking, if you have the option, play Fairy Macabre. And other cards from the sideboard. Journey to Nowhere is a 2 mana removal spell that deals with anything the opponent can present. Really good versus In the Mirror, really good against Riding Chrysalis, okay versus Gutter Snipe. Generally speaking, solid card, and I if possible, I try to play the first copy, sometimes I play 2. Lifelink, just more Spirit Links for red matchups mainly, and I also sided in against elves, mostly because I side out non-heroic creatures, so I have a lot of space for this type of cards. Doom Traveler, if you are playing against a lot of Titan Blades, you can play Doom Traveler and have more bodies just for 1 mana. It's not the best. It's just acceptable in a very narrow answer to the narrow problem. Note that it doesn't protect your creature from extract the concession with the, let's say, kicker, right? If they collect evidence, then Doom Traveler won't do much. That's why I stopped playing it, but in my opinion, it's good to say that it exists at least. There's also Gutshot. In the past, I was a very big enthusiast of Gutshot because it's a 0 mana spell, so it can kill Priest of Titania quite easily. But the more I played the Elves matchup, I realized that I don't need this type of effect, and instead of playing removal, which would be good, that's for sure, I want to play more protection spells. Standard Bearer, on the other hand, is a very interesting card that has multiple applications. First of all, it can stop the whole strategies. For example, if you are playing versus Infect, you are playing versus Heroic, Boggles, and so on. Playing Standard Bearer means it's as close to GG as possible because they can just not do their thing. Note, Gutshot, quite good at killing Standard Bearer, so if you are playing against Standard Bearers all the time, you can have more Gutshots in the deck. Okay, going back to Standard Bearer, it also redirects a few cards that are hard to see if you don't actively plan to side it in. For example, we are playing versus elves. Standard Bearer for some reason redirects Quirion Ranger and Timberwatch Elf, and the aura aspect of Nyxborg Hydra. So it's a really good card. Note that Mask Vandal is also a flag bearer, so if the opponent has the flag bearer, they will have another legal target for all of their actions, and it makes Standard Bearer much weaker. But generally speaking, it's a really good card. I also like it against Cowblade because Cowblade has Journey to Nowhere, so Standard Bearer trades 1-for-1 with it. It's also really good against the land they have, against the Basilisk Gate, because the Basilisk doesn't say that the creature you control gets the +6/+6, so it redirects the pump, so their sacred card or out of medic cannot attack freely. Okay, so let's go for the I feel I could find a few other cards that could fit into main against Sideboards, but they are I don't say bad, but they are such unique, and they need very specific situations to work that I decided to not mention them. Generally speaking, these cards are mentioned should cover all of your possible builds for the mono white version. Again, if you want to try the Boros version, it can be better. Okay, let's talk about the primer aspect. Keep on mull, Faku. Don't never ever keep a hand without the creature. Even if it's the best one ever, just mull to creature. Always. Unless maybe mull to 4 and you need to be lucky or something like this. But even though you should mull to creature and keep just creatures and lands. One-landers are acceptable with only Lagona Band Trailblazer and a bunch of good one-mana pan spells. Otherwise, it's a mulligan. I made a few mistakes of keeping extremely good one-landers with Akroan Skyguard and never drawing a second land, so don't do this if you don't have to. You should the deck mulligans quite well because it needs only a few cards to present a real threat to the opponent. So going to 5 isn't the worst thing ever. Of course, like you have fewer resources, but it's possible to win. I had even games when I was winning from mulligan to 3. So just do your thing. When you go low on cards, don't be afraid to keep only creatures and lands. Since close of the half of the deck are pump spells, you'll find something from the top. Easy. After sideboarding, your main goal is to have a creature protected and finish the game shortly after. Don't hard mull to certain hate cards, it's not worth it. So you are a linear deck, so you cannot accept the situation when you have the answers while not applying pressure. Because, for example, you kept Fairy Macabre versus Spy without a creature. This just don't work. Make sure that you have the basics, the fundamentals, so creatures and pump spells and lands, and then maybe the sideboard cards can matter in terms of keeping on mulliganing. Okay, another one. Pro tips. The deck is, like I said earlier, the deck is quite easy, but there are some tips or like tricks you can do. So make sure that you know them, test, and so on. First one is more tactical. You don't have to put pumps only on one creature. It's sometimes beneficial to divide pumps into 2 or 3 creatures. If you expect a removal, if you expect that your creature can be charmed forever, don't do so. I can also say that sometimes it's relevant to not play a pump spell. So, for example, if your creature is lethal anyway, just don't make it bigger. Instead, keep your pump spells for the next creature you'll draw. So maybe if you draw the creature, play pump spells on the second creature, you have 2 lethal threats. So it will be even harder for the opponent to jump it. Benevolence Blessing is a super tricky card because you can play the card on the opponent's creature, and since it protects only auras you control, you can make the opponent's auras to fall off. So it's good versus Nyxborn Hydra, it's good versus in the mirror, it's good versus multiple ways that people are trying to target something with the card. So for example, versus Ghostly Flicker or Ephemerate, this can be a counter spell, and so on and so on. There are multiple ways that you can do stuff. You can also play, for example, play Benevolence Blessing on the Crack Shaman, but at the same point, if you can do this, you can just Benevolent Blessing your own creature to give protection from the Crack Shaman's ability. So make sure that you use the card wisely. Benevolent Blessing can also enchant the opponent's Standard Bearer. Like I said, if you give it protection from white, it will be an illegal target to your auras. So you will be able to target your creatures anyway. Note that it will be a protection from white creature. So if you rely on the Laguna Band Trailblazer, don't pump it because it will be blocked forever. So keep that in mind. You can cast Spirit Link on the opponent's creature, like I said, to Gutter Snipe to neutralize it. The opponent can counter the Spirit Link trigger by killing their own creature post blocks before damage. Similar to the Life Link and how to neutralize it. It's quite obvious against Drazi spawns. It's a bit less obvious in the Red Black Madness matchup because they can generate so much card advantage that they can afford to lose a few creatures here and there and win the late game anyway. So make sure you play around it. The deck can work just fine on 3 lands. 4 is more than enough. Actually, the only 4 mana play is Guiding Voice plus Airbending Lesson. So playing the 5th land rarely matters. Maybe if you want to pay for the Spell Pierce or something like this. Generally speaking, if you have 4 lands, you shouldn't play the 5th land because it's possible to use this resource. For example, if you have Guiding Voice and you have something to discard, or the opponent has a Forbidden Familiar, so they don't draw a card, and so on and so on. High Umbra can be used as a way to block and not lose a creature, like I said earlier, Totem Armor, powerful mechanic. Skyward Spider is blue, so it can be countered by Pyroblast. Happened to me once, wasn't funny. Or block and deal damage to the Guardian of the Guild Pact. So it's quite important against Cowblades. And the last one, learn how to sequence your pump spells. For example, Umbra goes first if you need protection, or at least if you want to see if the coast is clear, because if they let you put the protection, the Umbra on the creature, that means that they didn't have a removal spell to not have to play against Totem Armor. Vigilance and Spirit Link are used in race situations. Again, Lifelink is good, Vigilance doesn't let the opponent to attack. Sorcery Pumps are better against Journey to Nowhere, since you won't lose value once you protect the creature with the Image Unscattered. Again, protection from white and auras stuff. Also, casting cast that has flashback means that you'll have more options in the future to do so. Okay, guys, thanks for watching. I hope you like it. If you want to check the sideboard guide I prepared, you can check the Mystical Teachings website. There's I will put the link below, and you can become a sub to Mystical Teachings and check my very detailed sideboard guide with over 20 matchups explained, how you should play them, and even more ins and outs. So far, I hope you like the content. Thank you for watching, and see ya.